Imagine a world where the maps are all finished, the satellite eyes see every corner, and every mystery has been neatly filed away. We take comfort in the idea that we are the masters of our domain, the ultimate catalogers of every living thing on Earth. But what if the greatest trick the natural world ever played was making us believe that there is nothing left to find? Deep within the suffocating heat of the Amazon or the silent shadows of the Himalayas, whispers of impossible creatures refuse to die out. These are the cryptids, beings like the Mapinguari or the Yeti, relics of a past that supposedly ended thousands of years ago. To the modern scientist, they are phantoms of the mind, yet to those who live at the edge of the wild, they are flesh. This creates a fundamental tension between our desire for objective truth and our ancient, primal fear of what hides in the dark. Every year, new species are discovered, reminding us that our biological census of the planet is still very much a work in progress. Small insects and deep-sea fish are expected, but the idea of a lost megafauna giant mammals hidden in the brush feels like a challenge. It is a challenge to our technology, our ego, and our understanding of how much space is actually left for something else. Why do these legends persist across different cultures and continents with such striking, terrifying similarities in their descriptions and behaviors? Perhaps it is because humans are programmed to look for patterns, even where only shadows and rustling leaves truly exist in reality. Or perhaps there is a physical memory of a time when we weren't the only giants walking through the dense, prehistoric forests. Today, we look at the claims of out-of-place artifacts and ancient survivors not as a joke, but as a scientific detective story. We will peel back the layers of sensationalism to see if a grain of biological truth remains at the heart of the myth. If a giant ground sloth or a relict hominid was still out there, where would they hide and how would they survive? The search for hidden species is more than just a hunt for monsters. It is a search for the limits of our own knowledge. We must ask ourselves if we are truly prepared to find something that doesn't fit into our carefully constructed boxes of history. Join us as we explore the intersection of folklore and biology, where the footprints of the past meet the reality of the present. We are going to look for the things that official science says shouldn't be there, but the world keeps insisting on showing us. To understand why we are so obsessed with these shadows, we have to look back at our own psychological evolution. For most of human history, the unknown wasn't a conceptual space for science, but a physical place just beyond the campfire. Our ancestors lived in a world of genuine giants, mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and ground sloths, where being hunted was a daily reality. Evolution fine-tuned our brains to detect predators, turning every snap of a twig into a potential life-or-death encounter in the brush. This hyperactive agency detection means we are hardwired to see a monster in the dark rather than just a tree. But legends like the Mapinguari in the Amazon aren't just vague fears, they are remarkably specific in their anatomical details. Indigenous tribes describe a massive, stinking beast with reddish fur, a backwards-facing foot, and a second mouth on its belly. To a modern paleontologist, this description sounds hauntingly familiar. Not like a demon, but like the extinct Megatherium or Mylodon. The giant ground sloth was a real creature weighing up to 4 tons that dominated the South American landscape for millions of years. It had reddish hair, massive claws that forced it to walk on the sides of its feet, and powerful scent glands. Official records state they vanished around 10,000 years ago, likely due to climate change or the arrival of human hunters. However, the collective memory of a culture can last for millennia, passed down through stories that morph into terrifying myths. Anthropologists call this geomythology, the idea that ancient oral traditions often preserve memories of real geological or biological events. If the Megatherium died out 10,000 years ago, why do sightings of something identical persist in the 21st century? In 1994, biologist David Oren embarked on a massive expedition, convinced he could find a living population in the deep jungle. He collected hair samples, plaster casts of footprints, and dozens of first-hand accounts from locals who claimed to have seen it. The evidence was tantalizing. Footprints with the characteristic backward look of a sloth's peculiar gait and tufts of strange reddish fur. For a brief moment, the scientific community held its breath, wondering if the lost world was finally about to be found. It would be the biological discovery of the millennium, proving that the fossil record isn't a closed book, but a map, But as with many things that hide in the green labyrinth of the Amazon, the physical proof began to melt away. When the hair samples from the Orion expedition were finally sequenced in a lab, the results were a cold shower for the hunters. They didn't belong to a prehistoric giant, but to a common forest dweller, or in some cases, weren't biological at all. The footprints were often revealed to be the overlapping tracks of other animals, or simple natural depressions in the mud. This is the heartbreak of cryptozoology. The closer we get to the ghost, the more it seems to evaporate into mundane reality. To find a 4-ton mammal, you don't just need a sighting, you need a massive functioning ecosystem to support it. A creature that size requires a breeding population of hundreds, thousands of calories a day and a vast territory. It's hard to hide a family of giants when modern satellites can count the individual trees in the rainforest from orbit. But the Amazon isn't the only place where the past refuses to stay buried beneath the layers of time and dirt. High in the Himalayas, the Yeti remains a cultural titan, a figure that has haunted Western explorers for over a century. In the 1950s, photographs of massive asymmetrical footprints in the snow sent the world into a frenzy of speculation and fear. Unlike the sloth, the Yeti wasn't a known prehistoric animal, but a mystery that sat right on the branch of our own family tree. If it existed, it would be a relict hominid, a cousin that took a different path in the freezing heights of the world. Science, however, demands more than blurry photos and stories told by Sherpas around a flickering fire in the dark. In 2017, a comprehensive DNA study led by Charlotte Lindqvist analyzed 9 Yeti samples, including skin, hair, and bone. The results were definitive. 8 of the samples came from local bears, Asian black bears, Himalayan brown bears, and Tibetan brown bears. The 9th sample, it came from a dog, a simple companion of humans, misidentified in the chaos of the high mountains. It turns out that the abominable snowman is likely a biological mosaic of real animals and the powerful effects of high-altitude hypoxia. When your brain is starved of oxygen and your eyes are blinded by white snow, the mind fills in the gaps. We create the Yeti because the alternative that we are truly alone in the vast, empty mountains is somehow more frightening. Yet, even as DNA tests close the door on these specific monsters, they open a window into something much stranger. The same genetic tools that debunked the Yeti are revealing that our own history is far more crowded than we once imagined. Just a few decades ago, we believed the story of human evolution was a straight line, a lonely march toward modernity. But recent DNA analysis of ancient remains has revealed a Lord of the Rings reality of overlapping, distinct human species. We shared the planet with Neanderthals, Denisovans, and the tiny hobbits of Flores, some as recently as 50,000 years ago. In the grand scale of geological time, 50,000 years is nothing. It is a mere blink of an eye in the dark. This means that for 99% of our history, we were never actually alone. The world was full of other Urses. It is highly probable that our earliest myths of giants, ogres, and wild men are literal memories of these other human tribes. If we could live alongside multiple species of hominids for millennia, why does the idea of one surviving today feel so impossible? Time. The answer lies in the harsh reality of extinction. A species needs more than just a hiding spot. It needs a legacy. To persist, a hidden population needs genetic diversity, which requires a large number of individuals to avoid the trap of inbreeding. We call this the minimum viable population, the mathematical line between a species that is living and one that is effectively dead. For a large primate or a ground sloth, this number is likely in the hundreds, making their total concealment almost statistically impossible. Yet, the ocean remains the ultimate sanctuary for the things that science says should have vanished millions of years ago. Consider the coelacanth, a prehistoric fish believed to have gone extinct 66 million years ago along with the mighty dinosaurs. In 1938, one was found alive and well off the coast of South Africa, a Lazarus taxon that defied every textbook. The coelacanth didn't need to evolve or change, it simply found a stable, deep-water niche where the world forgot to look. This discovery serves as a humbling reminder that the absence of evidence is not always the evidence of a species' absence. If a fish the size of a human could hide for 60 million years, what else is swimming in the midnight zone? We have mapped the surface of Mars and the Moon with more precision than we have mapped the floor of our oceans. In the deep, the rules of biology change, and the monsters of our past might just be the neighbors of our future. While the ocean offers deep water sanctuary, the land provides a different kind of hiding place, the vastness of the geological record. We often forget that fossils are incredibly rare. Only a tiny fraction of all living things ever become preserved in stone. For every skeleton we find, millions of animals lived and died without leaving a single trace for future archaeologists to uncover. This fossil silence means our picture of life on Earth is like a book with 99% of its pages ripped out. Within those missing pages, there is plenty of room for impossible artifacts, like the London Hammer or the Antikythera mechanism. When we find a piece of iron encased in ancient rock, our first instinct is to rewrite history with tales of time travelers. But science often finds a more grounded explanation in the power of chemical concretion and the speed of mineral growth. Under the right conditions, minerals can harden around a modern object in just decades, creating a fake ancient geological layer. Yet, the Antikythera mechanism is different. It is a real, physical piece of high technology from a time of supposedly simple tools. It proves that ancient civilizations were capable of far more complexity than we give them credit for in our modern arrogance. This raises a haunting question. If we could lose the technology of a mechanical computer for 2,000 years, what else have we lost? Is it possible that high-tech sparks have happened throughout history only to be extinguished by war, plague, or environmental collapse? This concept of lost progress suggests that humanity isn't moving in a straight line, but in a series of jagged, broken cycles. We find things like the nuclear reactor in Oklo, Africa, which looks like a massive industrial site from 2 billion years ago. Physical evidence shows it was a natural phenomenon, where uranium-rich earth and water created a self-sustaining fission reaction in the mud. But to the human eye, it looks so much like our own technology that we struggle to accept it as a product of nature. We are constantly projecting our own image onto the past, looking for ourselves in the rust and the stone we find. We want to believe in ancient astronauts or advanced predecessors because it makes us feel like we belong to a grander story. But perhaps the most incredible truth is that nature itself is the ultimate engineer, capable of creating things we still don't understand. As we look closer at these anomalies, the line between natural wonder and forgotten technology begins to blur in the most fascinating ways. Perhaps the most unsettling evidence of all doesn't come from ancient history, but from the very ground we walk upon. When we look at the strange, flat-topped mountains of the world, we see natural formations shaped by eons of erosion. But through a different lens, these landscapes look disturbingly like the terraced walls of a giant, abandoned open-pit mine. The planet quarry theory suggests that Earth was once stripped of its resources by a force far greater than ourselves. To a geologist, these are layers of sedimentary rock. To a theorist, they are the leftovers of a planetary-scale excavation. We find massive hexagonal columns like the Giant's Causeway that look like industrial waste or petrified remains of giant machinery. Science explains these as volcanic basalt cooling into perfect geometric shapes, a stunning display of physics in the wild. Yet, the human brain is a master of pareidolia, finding familiar patterns in the chaos of rocks and mountain ridges. We see stumps of giant trees in the mazes of Arizona because we want the world to be more magical than it is. This desire to see the Earth as a used-up world reflects our own modern anxieties about resource depletion and climate change. We are the first species capable of leaving scars on the planet that will be visible for millions of years to come. Our concrete cities, plastic layers, and radioactive isotopes will eventually become the anomalies for some future intelligence to find. In a way, we are currently building the impossible artifacts that will baffle the scientists of a world not yet born. This reveals a profound truth about our relationship with nature. We are terrified of being insignificant in the vastness of time. By believing in ancient giants or planetary minds, we grant our world a history that is intentional rather than accidental. We transform a cold, indifferent universe into a stage where grand dramas have been played out long before we arrived. The mystery of hidden species and lost tech is really a mirror reflecting our own curiosity and our fear of the dark. We search for the Yeti or the Mapinguari because we hope that there is still room for wonder in a mapped world. We look for alien reactors because we want to believe that the secrets of the universe are meant for us to solve. But the most important lesson isn't what we find in the dirt, but what the search says about the human spirit. As we reach the final edge of our investigation, we are left with a world that is simultaneously explained and deeply mysterious. Science has provided the tools to see through the illusions, to distinguish the bear from the yeti and the concretion from the artifact. It tells us that we live on a planet governed by the elegant, unyielding laws of physics and the slow grind of biology. But science also tells us that the universe is far more creative and vast than our ancestors could have ever dared to imagine. We are the descendants of those who looked at the stars and saw gods, and who looked at the shadows and saw monsters. That ancient spark of curiosity hasn't vanished. It has simply evolved into the telescopes and the DNA sequences of today. Every impossible find we debunk only deepens the real mystery. How did a collection of stardust become a species that asks why? We may never find a living megatherium in the Amazon or a crashed starship in the sands of a forbidden desert. But the fact that we are looking, that we are even capable of imagining such things, is a miracle of the biological mind. Perhaps the greatest secret of the Earth is not what is hidden in its layers, but that it produced us to find them. We are the eyes of the planet, the way the universe looks back at itself and wonders about its own incredible origins. Even if every footprint leads to a bear and every ancient reactor leads to a natural vein of ore, the wonder remains. Because a universe that can create a natural nuclear reactor is just as strange as one that holds an alien civilization. We live in a reality where the truth is often more surreal than the fiction we create to explain the world around us. So, as you look out your window at the familiar trees and the distant hills, remember that they are ancient and deep. The story of life is a multi-billion-year epic, and we have only just begun to read the very first few lines of it. There are still dark corners, still silent depths, and still enough room for the things we haven't even dreamed of yet. Keep searching, keep asking, and never be satisfied with the idea that there is nothing left for you to discover. Because in a world this vast and a time this long, the only thing that is truly impossible is the idea of an end. After all, if the coelacanth could wait 60 million years to be found, what might be waiting for you just out of sight?